In the 22nd century, the company Ambercop sends ships to mine other planets and capture alien creatures to bring back to Earth as food. A legend speaks of white space, a place free from disease and suffering where a person can be cleansed of all impurities. No one has reached it because a giant creature, Tin Lung, guards the way. One day, two space hunters find Tin Lung. Captain Bentley fires at the creature, but Tin Lung's mate blocks the shot with her scales. Hawthorne, wearing a special suit, targets the mate's weak spot on her neck and kills her. This enrages Tin Lung, who chases Hawthorne while Bentley prepares to fire again. Bentley's shot misses, and he loses control of the ship as a bright light flashes behind it. Tin Lung attacks, destroying the ship and killing Bentley. 24 years later, Lynn parks her bike outside a restaurant but can't enter because a guard blocks the door. She works for the Interstellar Conservation Enforcement ICE. Inside, Bentley's son, Richard, meets with a shady businessman who keeps a strange creature called a crazy bug in a glass container. The businessman shows Richard a map marking all the places where Tin Lung has appeared and offers a big reward for the creature's body. He grabs a fork and stabs the guard to get him off. Another guard charges at him and kicks him, but he knocks her out with a vase. The businessman smashes a chair over Richard's back and punches him a few times until Richard tackles him. They crash onto a table, and Richard starts beating the businessman. The businessman grabs a bottle, breaks it, and tries to stab Richard, but Richard slams his face onto a nearby bug. The bug crawls into the man's nose, causing him so much pain that he stays down. A third guard tries to shoot, but Richard grabs the map and escapes. Lynn sees this and leaves too. 3 months later, Lynn prepares to work undercover on the Essex spaceship. Her agent records have been erased, and now she must pose as a mining and fishing escort with a supply order. After she leaves, her co-workers talk about her belief that the white space will cure her. Moments later, Lynn boards the Essex and meets the captain, Richard. His brother Owen gives her a tour of the ship, introducing her to the crew, including the cook Batali, who warns Lynn to stay away from her boyfriend, Harpo. In the kitchen, there's an old cryopod repurposed as a fridge. Hawthorne, now older and a drunkard after losing Bentley, is also part of the crew. Lynn later stays in her room, working on her personal computer. Her profile appears, revealing she has a tumor and only 6 months to live. She then reviews intel from her boss and discovers that every crew member has a criminal past, making her mission even more dangerous. Hawthorne, Harpo, and Owen suit up and head out to hunt creatures called clickers. Lynn keeps asking questions during the process, which Richard finds strange because fishing escorts should already know this stuff. The trio waves a rock that attracts the small clickers, and they quickly follow it into the container. However, the big clicker refuses to enter and floats away. The men shoot at it, but it escapes. Owen breaks formation and chases after the big clicker, ignoring the others' warnings. The clicker enters an asteroid, and Owen takes a different tunnel to cut it off. Suddenly, a bright white light flashes for a few seconds, knocking Owen unconscious. Meanwhile, something massive appears on the radar, so Harpo and Hawthorne rush to push the container into the ship. Richard shoots a harpoon that connects to the asteroid, allowing Owen to grab it when he wakes up. As Owen moves, he accidentally bumps his head and slows down. To his shock, Tin Lung appears nearby. Owen shoots a tracker onto the creature's scales before the crew reels him back into the ship. They watch as Tin Lung vanishes into the bright light. During dinner, Lynn shares a story about a ship that vanished while tracking Tin Lung. She suggests it may have found the white space, theorizing that if black holes are entrances, white ones could be the exits. The crew laughs, dismissing the idea as a fairy tale. So Lynn proposes another theory. Following the tracker Owen through could lead the clickers to Tin Lung, doubling their fishing haul. However, Richard insists they've been fishing for months and need to head home. After dinner, Harpo is revealed to be cheating on Batali with the pilot, Ragsland. Later, Harpo approaches Richard and says he wants to try Lynn's extra fishing idea because he needs the money. Richard agrees but plans to finish their current order and drop Lynn off first to avoid her interference. Meanwhile, Lynn sneaks into the comms room and sends a message to the IC, unaware that her transmission is intercepted. A few hours later, Richard watches a recording from Bentley about Tin Lung and recalls the day his father gave him a sword. Ragsland interrupts him over the radio, reporting 2 small, unidentified ships approaching. Richard rushes to the cockpit and tells Ragsland to evade them, but the ships quickly block their path. Realizing they're dealing with pirates, the crew has no choice but to let them board to avoid harm. The crew hides Ragsland and Batali in a secret compartment while Richard places a beacon on the cargo. He also orders everyone to hide their weapons, hoping to avoid a confrontation. When the pirates board the ship, they immediately spot Lynn and start harassing her. Owen tries to defend her, but the struggle is brief. A pirate slashes his leg with a knife, and the captain shoves Lynn against the wall. She starts citing penal codes, which makes the captain suspicious. He checks under her shirt and finds her badge. The pirates steal all the cargo and supplies and place a tracker on the Essex before leaving. Furious, the crew blames Lynn, realizing her reports likely attracted the pirates. Richard orders Harpo to lock her in her room. Afterward, the crew debates their next move. With only 2 small bags of food left, finishing the fishing order seems impossible, but they can't return empty-handed. Richard suggests following Lynn's idea to hunt down Tin Lung, whose bounty could give them enough money to retire early. The crew agrees, but decides to catch a few clickers for food first. Later, Owen visits Lynn and asks why she's on the ship. Lynn explains that she's been tracking Tin Lung, and the Essex is the only ship that follows its course. Owen realizes that Richard has been following Tin Lung and confronts him. Richard admits he wants revenge for their father. Owen, furious, accuses Richard of using the crew for his personal vendetta without their consent. Suddenly, a valuable substance called ambergris hits the ship's front window. Richard believes Tin Lung is leaving a trail, but Owen calls it bait. Meanwhile, Harpo and Ragsland get dirty again. When they finish, Batali finds Ragsland's bra. The crew suits up to gather the ambergris and capture a giant clicker. While they work, pirates arrive to steal the ambergris. Richard curses, realizing the pirates found his beacon. The crew discovers the pirates also broke the hyperdrive, leaving them stranded. Stubbs, the mechanic, begins repairing it. Richard orders the crew back on the ship, but Harpo stays behind to finish capturing the clicker. The pirates open fire, and although the Essex has a protective force field, it won't hold for long. Richard orders Ragsland to release the waste chambers, even though Harpo is still outside. Harpo dodges the chambers and returns to the Essex with the captured clicker. The waste crashes into one pirate ship, but the other remains operational. The pirate captain launches missiles that could destroy the Essex. Just in time, Stubbs finishes repairing the hyperdrive, and the Essex escapes using hyperspeed. The crew confronts Richard for getting rid of their beacon. Harpo is especially furious, and when Richard accuses him of ignoring orders, Harpo defends himself, saying he saved everyone's lives by finding food. Richard shoves Harpo in response, and Hawthorne steps in to stop the fight from escalating. Meanwhile, Stubbs cleans the ambergris off the suits and notices the lock on the clicker crate is open. As he reaches to close it, tiny bugs crawl onto his hand and bite him. The creatures quickly slip under his clothes, driving him frantic as he tries to get them off. In his panic, Stubbs forgets to secure the crate. He runs to the bathroom to wash the bugs off, but they invade his body. Later, he returns to his room, hears strange voices, and starts screaming at the walls. After dinner, Batali tells Harpo she's pregnant. Harpo panics, worrying about the cost of raising a child, and steals some ambergris to hide in the fridge. Meanwhile, Richard checks on Lynn, who argues against killing Tin Lung but refuses to explain why. Richard ignores her concerns and leaves. Afterward, Lynn breaks the lock on her room and escapes. In the dimly lit corridor, someone sabotages the oxygen reserves. Lynn tries to move quietly, but is caught by Harpo, who grabs her from behind. Lynn immediately fights Harpo and easily overpowers him, thanks to her agent training. Stubbs sees the struggle, screams, and runs away, distracting Lynn. Harpo takes advantage of the distraction and knocks her out with a tool. When Lynn wakes up, she finds herself locked in the cargo bay and overhears Harpo telling Richard that she was the one who sabotaged the oxygen reserves. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Ragsland falls asleep and misses a signal that flashes on the screen. By the time she wakes up, the signal is gone. Batali brings food to Lynn, but she offers him a deal for a safe escape. Batali refuses and leaves. Shortly after, Lynn hears the clicker screeching in its crate. At the same time, Ragsland, and Richard hear a strange noise echoing through the ship. They check the scanner and discover dozens of destroyed ships surrounding the Essex, likely the work of Tianlong. In the vents, Stubbs crawls around, carving soap with a knife. Later, Richard tells Hawthorne that Harpo tampered with the oxygen. Hawthorne suggests that desperate people sometimes do irrational things, implying that Richard may have allowed the pirates to rob them as part of a plan to catch Tianlong. Richard ignores the remark and orders Stubbs to fix the oxygen, but no one can find him. Back in the cargo bay, the clicker escapes its crate and attacks Lynn. She fends it off by throwing boxes to slow it down while yelling for help. Richard hears Lynn's cries and quickly opens the door, pulling her out. He grabs a fire extinguisher and attacks the clicker, but it has no effect. The clicker charges after them, forcing Richard and Lynn to flee down the corridor. When hitting it with the extinguisher doesn't work, they run to an airlock and hide. The clicker catches up and grabs Lynn's leg, but Richard releases a crate, crushing the clicker to death. Afterward, Owen refuses to lock Lynn up again, and Richard takes responsibility for her. An argument erupts between the brothers, with Owen accusing Richard of being like their father, who abandoned the family to chase Tianlong. Enraged, Richard shoves Owen against the wall, insisting he's nothing like their father. Owen storms off to the comms room and sends out a distress signal, but the pirates intercept it. Meanwhile, Harpo and Ragsland sneak away for some private time. Harpo tries to convince her to side with him so they can leave, but Ragsland stays loyal to Richard. Minutes later, Richard spots the white hole, and Tianlong suddenly appears, crashing into the Essex with its massive body. The impact throws everyone off balance and weakens the force field to 50%. Owen suits up and heads out to confront Tianlong, and Richard orders Hawthorne and Harpo to join him. Owen maneuvers around the beast's attacks, guiding it toward an asteroid belt. He hooks a nearby asteroid with a rope and uses its momentum to circle around, landing on Tianlong's back. As he fires at the creature, it twists and knocks him off. Hawthorne tries to bring Owen back into formation, but Tianlong strikes Hawthorne in the process. Owen fires again, but Tianlong strikes him, sending him into a tailspin. Owen crashes into an asteroid, hitting his head hard and bleeding heavily. He apologizes to Richard for failing, but Richard ignores him and keeps shouting at his men to clear the way so he can fire his harpoon. Lynn disables his aiming system, and Richard reacts by punching her, knocking her unconscious. Outside, Tianlong grabs Owen and crushes him to pieces before activating a bright light and disappearing. Moments later, Harpo secretly tells Ragsland that Richard has gone too far and points out the dangerously low oxygen levels. Ragsland begins to consider mutiny as their only option. When Lynn regains consciousness, Richard explains they've reached the place where Bentley died. He hoped to feel closer to his father, but instead lost his brother. He wants to return to Earth due to the low oxygen, but Lynn insists they must find Stubbs to fix it. As they walk down the corridor, they hear noises in the vents. Suddenly, some goo drips onto the floor, and Lynn spots parasites in it, guessing that Stubbs is infected. She believes she can help him, but needs a way to protect herself. Richard hands her his sword, and Lynn accepts it on one condition. If she saves Stubbs, they must continue following Tianlong instead of returning to Earth. The pirate ship soon finds them, and the white hole opens again, allowing Tianlong to join them. Ragsland notices they're heading into a storm, and Richard orders her to keep going because the pirates won't follow them there. Suddenly, Tianlong creates colorful waves that make him disappear and disable the Essex's power source. The ship slows down, and the force field drops to 20%. While Ragsland looks for an alternative, Tianlong reappears next to the pirates and damages their ship. The pilot starts shooting from inside, and the captain comes out in a shuttle to open fire too. These weapons aren't enough to hurt Tianlong, who quickly destroys both ships before disappearing into another white hole. On the Essex, navigation goes down, so Ragsland tries to override the AI and switch to manual control. In Harpo's room, he tries to tell Batali about his mutiny plan, but she refuses to work with Ragsland. He reminds her that neither of them can pilot the ship, so they need her to escape. They agree to work together for the baby's sake. Meanwhile, Richard checks the ship's power source and discovers Stubbs damaged it too. At that moment, Tianlong appears and throws the destroyed pirate ship at the Essex, causing more damage. Ragsland activates the thrusters and enters the storm to try to lose the beast. As the pirate ship continues to roll over the Essex, Richard finishes fixing the power source, and the vessel can now go fast enough to avoid trouble. In a dark corridor, Lynn finds Stubbs and fights him. With a few quick moves, she cuts off his hand, and he runs away. He hides in the tool closet and uses a torch to close his wound. Minutes later, Ragsland finishes her bath and grabs her clothes from the locker, only to find the carved soap. Suddenly, Stubbs pushes her against the lockers and stabs her. He then goes to the kitchen to attack Batali, who defends herself with a pot. But Stubbs quickly recovers and corners her. Batali tells him about the baby, but he ignores her and stabs her too. Lynn runs in to attack him, but Stubbs kicks her down. Batali uses the distraction to hit him with the pot, and when he turns around, Lynn decapitates him with the sword as Batali falls dead. In the cockpit, Richard and Hawthorne detect Tin Lung's signal again. Richard rushes to get into his suit to go outside, which saves him from Harpo's plan to attack him. Once outside, Richard opens fire to draw Tin Lung's attention, and the creature starts chasing him. Richard flies near the ship, and Hawthorne gets a clear shot to fire the harpoon, which successfully traps Tin Lung. Unfortunately, the ship systems are still failing, and the AI raises the alarm, telling the crew to evacuate. Hawthorne tries to reach the escape pod, but Harpo blocks him, wanting the pod to escape with his girlfriend. A fight breaks out, and Hawthorne shows impressive moves for his age, but Harpo is still stronger and beats him. Just as Harpo is about to kill him, Hawthorne presses a button to activate his suit. The suit fires a harpoon that instantly kills Harpo. Meanwhile, Tin Lung chases Richard by flying around the Essex, causing more damage each time his body gets too close to the ship. Richard tries to kill him, but Tin Lung eventually catches him and crushes him. When Hawthorne emerges in his suit, he watches in shock as Tin Lung finishes killing Richard and flies into the Essex to blow it up. Remembering that the fridge used to be a cryopod, Lynn hides inside and activates the freezing sequence. The pod is expelled from the Essex, and a sleeping Lynn is thrown into the white hole Tin Lung opens to leave. At the same time, a rescue ship arrives, thanks to Owen's SOS message, and rescues Hawthorne. And that's how the movie ends. What did you think of this movie? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe and press the bell icon for more amazing videos. See you next time.